Welcome, everybody, to the Golden State with Mates post-game live after a 108-104 loss for the Golden State Warriors in the season opener against the Phoenix Suns. Plenty to take away from that first contest, and I'm here to read all your comments here, all your reaction from the game. I'm all about the overreaction to game one of 82 across the regular season. But as I said, plenty to take away, so much to get into. So looking forward to reading your comments, and I will as soon as they come through here. So early thoughts. I mean, this game kind of went completely the opposite to what I thought it would. I honestly thought that for either team to win this game, they would have to put up at least 120 points. That's what I spoke about with Luke Duffy on our kind of preview episode about 36, 48 hours ago now. And it wasn't the case. The Suns win at 108, 104. And I mean, the first thing is the Warriors shooting, right? And I didn't think the Phoenix defense was that good. But at the end of the day, you look at the box score and you see the Warriors shoot 35.6% from the field, 23.3% from 3-point range. Ugly. Really, really ugly. And apart from a third quarter where they were able to get to the free throw line a ton, we'll obviously get into that. They were, I mean, it was a rough night for the Warriors offensively. There's little doubt about that. It's probably putting it nicely, to be fair. Majority of players struggled. So Steph led the team with scoring with 27 points, but was still only 8 of 20 from the field. What was he from 3-point range? I think he was 4 of 13. I'll just double check that. I know he was 3 of 12 at one point, but then he made that last one to cut the margin to 2 with 30 seconds to play. Steph was 4 of 14 in the end from 3-point range. So, yeah, rough night offensively for the Warriors. And I don't think it was necessarily anything the Suns did defensively. I mean, we're going to talk about Josh Okogie. I mean, the Warriors almost lost this game because of Josh Okogie. And that is very painful to say. Not only him, but Yusuf Nurkic as well, because along with obviously the poor shooting, the size or lack thereof for the Warriors was exposed in regard to their starting lineup. Steve ended up going with the expected starting lineup, I suppose, with Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Kevon Looney. And the Suns took advantage of that with 17 offensive rebounds. What I will say, like a lot of people will look at that as a big factor in the game, and I certainly think it was. However, the Warriors also had 19 offensive rebounds, and the facts are the Warriors had their chances here offensively to win this game and unfortunately weren't able to execute. So I don't think the offensive rebounding stuff is going to have it shouldn't be too much of a talking point from specifically this game, but I do think it could be a talking point moving forward because there are going to be other occasions where the Warriors are allowing these types of numbers while the opposing team is actually boxing out and getting defensive rebounds and limiting the Warriors to, say, less than 10 offensive rebounds. So I do think that could be a major talking point going forward, but I don't think it was actually too much of a difference maker in this one necessarily. And I mean, Okogie, could anyone like actually get a body on him? Some of these, like he's flying in for everything on the offensive glass, and that really hurt the Warriors at times. Again, I don't think it was the major difference in the game. I think just the shooting at the end of the day was, but the Warriors will certainly look back and rue their missed opportunities because the Suns without Bradley Beal, if you go into this game and you say Bradley Beal is not playing and you keep Kevin Durant to 18 points on 7 for 22 shooting, the Warriors have to be incredibly confident that they win that game. Particularly when you say, well, Booker only scored 17 in the final 3 quarters. Booker came out like a house on fire. I thought Steve waited too long to actually put Gary Payton II in and on him. He let him really get rolling to a point where the Suns had a 24-12 lead early in the game. I thought the defense on Booker was reasonable for the rest of the game, kept him somewhat quiet, I suppose, but he still finished with his 32, 6, and 8, made a couple of really nice passes late in the fourth quarter, and that's basketball at the end of the day. The Phoenix Suns, they executed better down the stretch, despite the inefficient shooting of Kevin Durant, who was obviously back at Chase Center with a crowd filled Chase Center for the first time since leaving the franchise in 2019. So, I mean, we'll get into some of the individual stuff here, and that will kind of flow out to team stuff as we go along here. One of the major talking points, and I'm interested to hear Steve talk. You might have already, but I haven't checked any of the press conferences since. I do apologize for being late onto this live stream. I was finishing up my game report for Blue Man Hoop. Given I get paid to do that, probably takes a little bit more precedence over this YouTube live stream, but I do hope to be able to do this most games as we move forward here in the regular season. But some of the individual stuff, or sorry, I was talking about the one of the main talking points was the fact that Jonathan Kuminga closed over Andrew Wiggins in this one, and we'll get into that as we talk about some of these players from an individual standpoint. The starting lineup, right? First half was a disaster. It really was. That was the kind of obviously first look at this starting lineup, which is small. Now, obviously, we've got to take everything that happens without Draymond as with a grain of salt, I suppose. But it was rough because offensively they weren't getting it done. They were simply not making shots, and defensively, the offensive rebounds, the amount of and ones. You'd almost look at that, the amount of and ones in the first half as the difference in this game because there are so many times there, like little ticky-tack fouls where it's got to be one of the most frustrating things in basketball when you just touch a guy and foul him and allow him to play through the contact easily to finish the basket. It's like if you're going to foul the guy and make him go to the line for 2 free throws, not the and one. And the Suns had a multitude of and ones. It started first, I think, Suns' first possession was Nurkic down the lane. Wiggins touches him with one finger on the hip. Now, you could probably look at the ref and say, do you really need to call that first possession? But you shouldn't be putting yourself in that scenario if you're Andrew Wiggins. You either foul him hard and make him go to the line for 2, or you just let him have the layup. Like, pick your poison, but don't do what you did and give up an easy and one. I think Wiggins gave up another and one on a KD 4-point play late in the second quarter. I mean, let's go through the game chronologically. So, as I said, the Suns get out to a 24-12 start. And then the Warrior bench, which unsurprisingly to me, kills the Suns bench to an extent. And what I mean to an extent is they actually should have beaten them by more. I think they'd be disappointed with the fact they weren't able to capitalize on the fact that when Booker went out of the game with there was a 10-minute period there, basically from 5 minutes to go in the first quarter to about 5 minutes into the second quarter, where the Suns scored 6 points. 6 points. It was 24-12, and then when Booker returned with, I think there was about 7:30 left in the second quarter, he returned and the score was 35-30 Warriors. They scored 6 points in 10 minutes. So the Warriors completely turned the tap off on the Suns' offense. So that was great, but they were missing so many easy looks on the other end. Again, I don't think this was anything to do with the Suns' defense. Like, Okogie is a high-level defender, don't get me wrong, but outside of that, I mean, Grayson Allen can be a solid defender, but he was pretty much a no-show in this one, had very little impact. Eric Gordon had a couple of nice defensive possessions. He stripped Wiggins on a couple of occasions. Sturdy defender, but not an elite defender anymore at this point of his career. I mean, Booker, Durant, solid defense. I'd be happy. I might need to get some input from a Suns perspective on what they actually thought of their defense, but I honestly thought that some of this stuff was just the Warriors. I mean, how many missed layups in the first half? How many? And that just cost you the game at the end. And I think Wiggins typified that. I mean, this has been going on for a few seasons now with Wiggins, where there is some serious missed opportunities at the rim with him, with layups that he just should be making, that I could almost make. Chucks to 14, first one in the group chat. Warrior fans, any chance? The first comment we get is from a Suns fan saying, "Go Suns." No, well-deserved victory. Like, I'm not going to hide away from that. I do think the Warriors missed their opportunities and that they will be very disappointed they didn't win, particularly. Chucks to 14. We look garbage tonight. I don't think either team played very well. Durant goes 7 for 22 from the field. And that was one thing Luke and I spoke about in our preview, was the fact that with this Warrior starting lineup, you're going to have Klay Thompson guarding Kevin Durant. Well, Klay actually did a good job. Like, we were laughing about the fact that was the matchup going into it. And I assumed that KD was probably going for a minimum 25. And so to keep him to 18 points, 722 shooting, again, the Warriors would think we do that, we win the game. And yet they lose. And so this is like a big missed opportunity. Now, at the end of the day, it's game one of 82. There's no need to overreact too much, but it's disappointing nonetheless. Uh, Chuckster14 says, knowing CP3 was on the floor really had me nervous. So let's talk about Chris Paul and his Warrior debut, right? So bad first half, albeit he was part of the bench unit that got the Warriors back in the game. And that's the whole point, right? Is that now when Steph Curry sits, the Warriors actually look like a competent NBA team, which for a lot of the last decade, and particularly the last few years, where, there's no more Sean Livingston and there's no more Andre Iguodala kind of thing, or at least Iggy close to his prime, the Warriors have, a bench unit that really struggles. And if they can, go even like plus minus of 0 in those non-Steph Curry minutes, that's a positive. Well, they were actually better than that, right? So what was Steph plus minus in this one? Just double checking. So Steph plays 30 minutes, nearly 31 minutes. In foul trouble, obviously played more. Otherwise, he was a -9. So the Warriors were a +5 with Steph Curry on the bench. That's a major positive if you're the Warriors. Another major positive, you bring Chris Paul in, turnover issues. Now, Chris Paul had his own turnover issues in the preseason. And again, this is only game one, but the Warriors had 6 turnovers in the first 3 quarters. Really good. This was not a typical Warriors throwing the ball all over the place and just needless turnovers that turn into fast break opportunities for the other team. And that's probably why the Warriors were able to keep Durant and Booker, even in the last 3 quarters, somewhat quiet, is because they were able to get into their half-court defense a little bit more than what we've seen from the Warriors in the past. Chuckster says, that's what I saw tonight. The bench actually came back and took the lead. Dario was an impact player tonight too. Yeah, Dario Saric was good. There's some issues with him in terms of being able to finish around the rim at times. Like, he's obviously not a power athlete that's going to go up and dunk stuff. And I do think when there's heavy contests from the opposition big, he can struggle at times to kind of finish through contact or around contact. So there's some stuff there that needs to be ironed out. I do think that I would like to see moving forward, I would like to see more CP Kuminga pick and roll with Saric spaced out on the perimeter than CP Saric pick and roll with Kuminga spaced out on the perimeter. So Chuck says we're missing his floor general mentality. That's why we had so many turnovers in reference to Paul there. So yeah, I mean, that was the thing, I guess, at the end of the day, was that the Suns kept the Warriors in the game to an extent, despite their poor shooting. One with the fouling in the third quarter, where the Warriors got to line on 16 occasions in the third quarter, and they ended up having 19 turnovers to the Warriors 11. So the Warriors had some down the stretch, which were disappointing, like 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter. But like overall, you'd have to say, like, Chris Paul a success in his first game. Now, he didn't shoot the ball well. So he finishes with 14.6 rebounds, 9 assists, 4 for 15 shooting. Didn't make any of his 6 3-point attempts. But what's the whole reason you bring in Chris Paul? You bring him so he can run the second unit and look like not just a competent NBA team, but have a good second unit when Steph's off the floor. And you bring him in when if Steph gets into foul trouble, like he did in the third quarter, where he's out of the game at, basically 4 minutes into the third with 4 fouls, you can actually survive. And not only survive, but you can thrive. And so I think from that perspective, you have to say that Chris Paul's Warrior debut was a success for him individually and for the reasons they brought him in. Now, at the end of the day, 4 for 15 shooting is poor. He'll need to work on that. But I do think that he was able to control the game in a way that Warrior fans could have only ever hoped a game would be controlled with Steph Curry off the floor. Because really, I mean, last few years you've been playing Russian roulette with Steph Curry on the bench, and you're just hoping and praying that you can survive those minutes. Well, right now, I think, the Warriors second unit should be, I've said it throughout the preseason, even before that, this Warriors second unit should be at least top 10 in the league. So they were 17th last season. They should be top 10. They may be even top 5, because you have Paul, Kuminga, Saric out there. Moody, we'll talk about him in his first half as well. That's like, they're deep. They are deep. And again, I think they're much deeper than the Suns, and that's why when the Suns are missing Bradley Beal, they'll be, the Warriors will be so disappointed the fact they lost that game. You're playing without Bradley Beal, and then the Suns, when Book basically aside from the early fourth quarter, where they went on an 11-0 run. Aside from that, whenever Book was on the bench, the Suns looked trash. They really did. KD not having anything going, their second unit, Eric Gordon struggled from the field tonight. They struggled, and I spoke about that kind of offensive period they had late in the first, early in the second quarter, where they were garbage. They really were. And again, I don't think they were doing anything defensively that was really limiting the Warriors, but the Warriors just couldn't make shots. And at the end of the day, it's a make or miss league, and that's what happened. So Chuck said, I've seen improvement from Moses Moody. He deserves more playing time. I tweeted out in the first half that if Moses Moody ever plays, less than 15 minutes ever again, that fans should just storm the floor. That first half, he was the best player in for the Warriors in the first half. So he has 11 points in less than 12 minutes. But everyone will point to the scoring aspect, 4 or 5 shooting, 2 or 3 from 3-point range. I think that the defense was probably the best aspect from Moses Moody in that period. He had 3 steals and a block. It was the most active 12 minutes of defense I've ever seen from him in his 3-year career, or now coming into his 3rd season. He was absolutely fantastic. I'm surprised he didn't play more in the second half. He was kind of a non-factor for the Warriors in the second half. He finished with 18 minutes. So he only played just over 6 minutes in the second half, which, looking back at it, might have been the wrong decision. Chuck says, we need a PG. Book is great, but better in his normal role. Yeah, that might, who was you had Jordan Goodwin, I suppose, a little coming off the bench. Yeah, I don't, there's basically no point guard there for the Suns, but I suppose their issues tonight might have been heightened a little bit by the fact that Beal was out. Obviously, with him coming back into the lineup at some point, you're going to have another ball handler there, another guy who may be primarily a shooting guard, but he can handle the ball and he can play make for others a little bit. So especially in that second unit when Book's off the floor, I think Beal will be out there and be able to run the offense a little bit. Back to Moses Moody, though. I think looking back at it, Steve might have wanted to play more in the second half. Again, it seems to be a thing between him and Gary Payton II. Now, you can play them both in second units kind of thing, but when you're coming down the stretch of games, late third, fourth quarter, whatever it is, and you want more starters on the floor and you've only got, 2 or 3 of your bench players out there, then I think Kerr wanted Peyton out there a little bit more for his defensive purposes. And GP2 at the end of the day was the most impactful player from a plus-minus standpoint for the Warriors. And he had a huge defensive impact. It was plus 15 in his nearly 22 minutes. So it's going to be a common theme, I think, for the Warriors this season, is the kind of push and pull between Moses Moody and Gary Payton II, where you're going to have, one in there for offensive purposes, one in there for defensive purposes, and you're probably going to have a period in the second quarter, and maybe early in fourth quarters, depending on the situation of the game, where they play together. But overall, I think most Warrior fans would come away from this thinking that Moses Moody needs to play more, and that he needs to be. There just shouldn't be a question anymore on whether he sits some nights or not. He should just be playing every game. It's as simple as that. So he was the biggest positive in the first half. While we're talking about Moody, let's talk about Kuminga. You got the whole Jonathan Kuminga experience in this one. For anyone that's never watched him play, you just got everything. And this is the thing. He just does so much stuff. I've spoken about it before. He just does so much stuff out on the floor. And, for him, he was limited in the first half with 3 fouls. Really disappointing ones. I think he had one on Booker early. Booker's a crafty offensive player. That happens. But then he had one on Eubanks, I think it was, where he was trying to help from the weak side kind of thing. And that was just a ticky-tack one that he didn't need to give away at that point after he committed his first one. And then he absolutely barrels over Yuta Watanabe offensively. And so he plays 5 minutes. He has 3 fouls. He had a bucket. It was okay aside from the 3 fouls, but then obviously, Steve can't utilize him for the rest of the first half. So you go from that, and then all of a sudden, an hour later or an hour and a half later, he's closing the game for the Warriors, and he's part of what Steve defined in that game as their best 5, which is unbelievable to think of, really. But it just goes to showcase the kind of X factor and difference that you can get from Jonathan Kuminga, because in the second half, he looked really good. He had, 12, he ended up with 12 points. I thought he was fairly active on the glass. So he had 6 rebounds. I think a couple of them, yeah, 3 of them were offensive. So he was really active on the glass, and that's what the Warriors are going to need. So 12.6 rebounds, an assist, a couple of steals, a block, 4 of 8 shooting. It's all looking great. It's all looking great. He's closing above Andrew Wiggins. Misses 2 free throws with 90 seconds remaining that would have given the Warriors the lead. And so you just get everything from Jonathan Kuminga. You get the fouls. I think he might have had a couple of turnovers. You get a couple of missed free throws in a clutch moment, and then amongst all that, you get the great stuff as well, where offensively, there's just he can duck in sometimes against smaller opponents and finish around the rim. I still love his combination with Chris Paul. So it's just the classic Jonathan Kuminga experience, where there's a lot of bad, some ugly, but a lot of good at the same time. And he ends up playing 20 minutes in a game where he would have clearly played at least 25, if not for the foul trouble in the first half. So the biggest thing, at least, I'll take from that is the fact that, hey, he's earned Steve's trust, right? Game 1 of the regular season, he's closing over Andrew Wiggins. And I'm sure a lot of Warrior fans would have thought that would have taken 15, 20 games at least before we saw that. No, game 1. And I liked it. I know he missed the free throws late. I think he had that foul on Booker, which was probably not an offensive foul. I'll just get to a couple of Chuckster's comments here. Other than Saric, it looked like you guys were playing an aggressive small ball game and still made it tough. Is Clay not getting his normal looks because Green is out of the game? I almost forgot about Wiggins. What happened to him in the second half? You guys are pretty deep too. I mean, one of the biggest disappointments, I think, for the Warriors in this one was the fact that Nurkic outplayed Looney to such an extent. I thought this was one of Loon's poorer games. Like, usually he's a consistent presence. You know what you're going to get from him. But Nurkic really bullied him at times in the paint and on the glass. So Loon does have 11 rebounds. He does have 5 offensive. So, like, he plays okay, like standard 7 points. Missed a few kind of around the rim, 3 of 6 shooting. But Nurkic, 14 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block shot, 5 of 8 shooting. I thought he was, he really got the better of that Loon matchup. And I think going into it, the Warriors would have hoped that would have been the other way around. I was impressed by Nurkic. I'm not a fan of his at all, but I think he made the Warriors look small. And the Warriors would have been going into that game thinking, no, we can get away with it a little bit because Loon will be, a constant presence on the glass. But, Nurkic, I think, got the better of that battle. In terms of your Clay question, Clay, funny game, because a lot of people will look at the disappointing shooting numbers, the fact he only has 12 points. It's a continuation of what we saw in the preseason, which was incredibly disappointing. He shot less than 30% from the field in preseason. So he finishes with 15 points, 6 for 18, 3 of 11. Ugly offensively, don't get me wrong. And in answer to your question in terms of he's not getting his normal looks because Green is out, that is probably a factor. I think that's a good point. The other factor is I'm not sure, just like physically, athletically, we've heard during the offseason is the fact that he looks great physically and athletically. I don't see it. I'm sorry, I don't see it. And when he's coming around off screens and stuff like that, it's just not the same crispness is the word I'm going to use. Like the same crispness in terms of coming off screens, catching the ball and firing. I mean, he had a couple of threes that looked good. There were times where you sorry. There were times where you wonder, like, is he getting back into the groove of things? And then ultimately it just doesn't happen over the course of the game. So there was at one point, I think he was 5 of 12 at one point, I think in the third quarter. And I thought to myself, hey, if he makes his next couple of shots here, then all of a sudden he's like 50% from the floor. And I thought his defense on KD was great. And I was a little bit bewildered by the way that KD was working offensively on Clay, because he was basically just posting him up and then trying to make plays from there. I think that's completely the wrong move, because if Clay wants one thing, I think it is for players to post up on him, because he's a better post defender than he is a perimeter defender at this point of his career with injuries. He's a sturdy, strong perimeter defender. So he's basically everything KD was getting was fadeaway jumpers. And on other nights, KD is going to, take 22 of those and he's going to make bloody 15 of them and have 35 points. But as a defense, that's ultimately what you want to do, really, is trying to make things as tough as possible for him. Don't give him any cheap ones. He got to the free throw line a couple of times, but not an exorbitant amount. So I thought Clay defensively really held up well. And that has to give you a lot of optimism moving forward in terms of his ability to be able to guard up, obviously, against threes and fours, which he's going to be doing now if the Warriors, well, he's doing it anyway because Wiggins is the primary perimeter defender, but all of a sudden he goes from guarding threes to guarding fours if you're going to have Chris Paul out there alongside he and Steph as well. So I think that was, a fairly optimistic outlook from that end of the floor. He had 7 rebounds. So again, that's basically, it's just a reiteration of what we've seen in preseason with him. Shooting the ball poorly offensively, holding up pretty well as a post defender, and actually showing a little bit of improvement on the defensive glass. Could he average 6 rebounds this season? I think he needs to, and I think he's capable of that. So I am sorry, just getting a call there. Um, sorry, I've lost where I was, but talking about Clay, yeah, I think he needs to be able to find an offensive rhythm. I think Draymond coming back will be able to, uh, provide that a little bit for him. But yeah, I mean, how far does it go here? The funny thing with Clay is in terms of social media, and social media is obviously a lot of time and encapsulation of the best and worst, right? Or the great contrast. Like with Clay, you have fans who think, no, he'll come right. Like let him have the greenest of green lights, he'll come right. And then you have other fans who think, oh, he shouldn't even be part of the closing lineup. Like get rid of him, like whatever. Like there's such a drastic contrast between the two. Ultimately, it's like, well, I think he'll come right at some point, but it doesn't mean he can just shoot the ball willy-nilly. And, it doesn't mean that, he should be having more shots than, say, Wiggins or even Kuminga at some points. Like, he shouldn't be forcing things. There's still got to be a shot selection aspect with him. Um, sorry, another call. So it's going to be a wait and see with him, but there's clearly concerns going on. Wiggins is the other one. So Wiggins, I thought was worse because some of his defensive stuff was really disappointing, and you also had his offense, which ended up being 4 of 12, 0 of 3, 2 of 3 at the line. Some missed layups, as I spoke about early, like really, really frustrating. So he's got to get back to somewhere near his best here, and he had some efficient games in the preseason, scoring wise. Defensively, I think he's just a shell of himself. Maybe some plays in this one where, he was able to, stay in front of Booker. He's clearly still the Warriors, not best perimeter defender because I think that's clearly Gary Payton II, but in terms of guys that are playing, 30 plus minutes or whatever, he's clearly the guy that Steve is trusting for the big matchups out on the perimeter. But he was just getting cooked early by Book. He really was. And I was disappointed with the fact that it took so long for Booker, for Steve to bring Payton on to Booker. More things here. We've talked about Clay, Wiggs spoken about, Loon we've spoken about, Chris we've spoken about, Steph was Steph, right? Like he didn't shoot the ball overly well. Like he'll be right. He'll be right. Like that's the kind of least concerning aspect for the Warriors. And then Kuminga, we've spoken about. Payton. So again, this classic box score game for Gary Payton II. 1 point, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals. That's not the right word. I'm very it's amazing how different the Warrior defense can look with Gary Payton II on the floor as opposed to when he's off the floor. Like he comes in that first quarter and immediately makes an impact to not only he's just infectious almost to the Warrior defense because all of a sudden you've got other guys who almost have a spring in their step defensively when GP2's on the floor because they see what he's almost a defensive leader as such rather than just what he does individually. And what I mean by like Moody defensively was so active in that first half. And so there's always a push and pull for me with GP2 because offensively he is very meh. He does fit the Warriors system better offensively than he does with every other team. I think we saw that with Portland last season. He's going to have to make his corner threes. I think he missed a couple tonight. So it's an interesting one because at times you see the Warriors getting torched and you just think GP2 needs to play more. And then there's other times where, he misses a corner three or whatever else, and you just think, well, if Moody's out there and he's got that corner three, he's probably nailing that. So it's a tough one. It's one that Steve's going to have to keep, rolling the dice with and kind of chopping and changing, I think, as the season goes on. But I think the ultimate point is that both Moody and GP2 played well, and I think both of them need to be playing 15 to 18 minutes every given night. Surridge, 7 points, 7 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 of 11. With 3 of 11, if he was like 1 of from 3 and he was just getting wide open looks and missing them, right? I'm okay with that. More concerning is the fact that he was just missing layups. And I'm not saying they were wide open layups, but some of his finishing, as I said before, through contact, around contact. I mean, some weren't even hitting the rim. Like, he was just throwing the ball up on the backboard. So that was a tough watch at times. I still don't have. I saw enough in preseason. He's still a fantastic fit, I think, for the Warriors. There's no issues there for me at all with him. I thought his 7 boards is a great result. Actually thought some of his defensive stuff was pretty good. Just in terms of as a rim protector, he had a couple of blocks there, which is like come out of nowhere. So that was handy, but otherwise a solid game. But the 3 for 11 does stand out a little bit. I still think he'll be part of a Warrior bench unit that will ultimately be very, very good this season, and that is probably going to win them a lot of games. It should help win them a lot of games on the road. I suppose that the big pessimistic outlook on this game is the fact they start 0-1 with a home loss, and now they've got 7 of the next 8 games on the road. 7 of the next 8 after at being at 0-1. That's tough. Starts with the Kings on Friday at Golden One Center. That's going to be tough. There's little doubt about that. So, yeah, I mean, what are we going to see here? We don't want to see another 3-7 start like last season. It's hard to read what it's hard to read into what you saw tonight, because I think ultimately you look at the shooting percentages and just think they're not shooting 35.6% from the floor again. Like, they're not shooting 23%. I mean, they will a couple of times, but not consistently. So I think you look at that and you think, yeah, you get your offense back to 45, 50%. I think you have to love the fact the turnover issues weren't there, and that seems to be a significant difference with Chris Paul coming in. That's a positive. I mean, some people might say, oh, well, you're not going to get 6 turnovers in 3 quarters again, so you should have taken advantage of that. Maybe that's the case, but I think ultimately there was enough there to not be too down and to not overreact too negatively to this game. There'll be fans on social media that will do that, but, it was a much improved second half, and they should have ultimately taken advantage of their where they outscored the Suns 40-19. The first half was, the end of the first half, 31-11, the Suns. From that 7:30 mark when Booker came in, the Suns outscored the Warriors 31-11. That's the difference. Suns going 9-0 run to close the half. That's the difference, right? And it's a game of runs. It's a game of, it's a make or miss league, and ultimately, the Suns executed better. I think they deserved the win. I thought the refereeing was actually decent. I mean, there are a few calls, the Kuminga one on Booker, where I always get frustrated with those ones because, real time, I get why you call it kind of thing. But then Steve Kerr challenges, you have the opportunity to go to the review and have a look at it, and you still keep it as the same call as on the floor when the callers and whatever else are saying, no, that should be overturned. That's more frustrating sometimes than other, bang bang plays that are 50-50, which, could go either way. So I thought the refereeing was, ultimately pretty good. Uh, yeah, not really too much else to take away from this one. Disappointing result, but I don't think there's any need to be too negative. Uh, is there going to be a size issue? Yeah, absolutely, but their offense should be much better than what it was tonight, and it was actually the offense that ultimately lost Golden State the game. Quick thoughts on the Lakers Nuggets matchup. Uh, I mean, Nuggets just got the job done. I always find it difficult to see a rival team going into the reigning champions building on ring ceremony night and winning. We saw that the Warriors started off 3-7 last season, but they beat the Lakers fairly comfortably in their season opener on ring ceremony night. There's just the vibe and the energy in the crowd and everything like that is just, I mean, it's too much to overcome, I think, at times. And the Lakers fought hard. The interesting thing for me there was the fact that like they're still semi-reliant on LeBron James. Like, he went out in the first quarter, and in the final 5.5 minutes of the first quarter, the Lakers scored 4 points. That would be concerning if I'm a Laker fan. AD, Anthony Davis. New NBA, same Anthony Davis. New NBA season, same Anthony Davis. 17 points in the first half. Goes toe-to-toe with Jokic, who had 19 in the first half. They were kind of both cooking each other on the offensive end. And then you have 0 points in the second half. How do you, I don't get that. And this is what holds Anthony Davis back. And we'll look at him as a superstar player. But this is what holds him back from being like an MVP top 10 player in the league. So I don't think he's a top 10 player in the league. And it's because of shit like this. How do you go a whole half without scoring? Really? Your team needs you. Jokic, I think, is an improved defender, but he's not a great defender by any means. I don't understand. And this is what like Anthony Davis does on a regular basis. He can just go missing in games. He had a really good second round series against the Warriors in last season's playoffs, but there were still times where he just went missing and just completely evaporated almost from the game and had very little to no impact. Like, I don't know how a superstar does that, to be honest. So disappointing game from him, or disappointing second half from him. Lakers will be disappointed overall, I suppose, in the outcome. I thought they were not a 50-50 shot, but they probably had a 30-40% shot at winning that game. LeBron seems to be on a bit of a minutes restriction. I have concerns behind AD, Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood. Some like the Lakers second unit at times they were running was ugly to me. Again, when LeBron was off the floor. So Nuggets, I have concerns about their second unit because I think Warrior fans will know full well that if you're a reigning champion and then you're kind of putting the pressure on young guys to really carry your second unit the following season, things don't always pan out that well. And we saw that with Golden State last season. And I think Mike Malone and the Nuggets are really putting an onus on their young players to step up in that second unit and really lead the way. And there's got to be some question marks there. I don't think Denver necessarily is good as what they were last season. However, that starting five, Jamal, KCP, MPJ, Gordon, Jokic is still, I think, the best five in basketball. So they're going to be not impossible to stop. They're going to be very hard to stop. But anyway, we'll finish it up there. Nearing on 40 minutes. I'll go and do some more writing for Blue Man Hoop, the articles that we published tomorrow AM American time. Thanks for everyone that tuned in. Thanks to Chuckster14 for coming in and giving his thoughts and reaction to the game. Again, congratulations on the win. I think well-deserved. Phoenix, just a slightly better team tonight. I don't think they should have been. The Warriors will definitely be disappointed with the opportunity that they missed out on there. But two teams that should improve off that performance and hopefully be top four seeds in the Western Conference moving forward. Other than that, guys, you can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on Twitter or X, whatever Elon's calling it. Otherwise, you can leave comments on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. Looking forward to the next post-game live, hopefully on Saturday, my time, Friday night, American time, as the Warriors face the Kings at Golden One Center. So looking forward to that. Hopefully the Warriors can get their first win. Cheers.